What's up YouTube, Dale here from Zephyr, and today I am bringing you a very spicy concoction for Yubel involving Despias. Now it is a very small Despia engine, and I will talk you through why we are including them within this engine itself, or within this deck itself. As a note, it does not contain branded fusion. This is not a branded version. This is literally using the Despias to help aid Yubel in its fusion capabilities. So with all of that out of the way, please smash that like button, hit that notification bell, and subscribe so you don't miss out on any more upcoming content. With all of that out of the way, I'm going to dive headfirst into the profile, explain what we've got, talk you through why we've got it, and then talk you through the other variants you could easily look at if you wanted to shake it up at that little bit more. So for the Yubel cards, of course, we are playing the one Yubel, the one Terra Incarnate, and the one Ultimate Nightmare. Now the strategy of this deck still stays the same. You maintain the core aspect of what Yubel provides, but what you're doing is you're adding another aspect to it by being able to provide you with a consistency card in the form of a Luba alongside mini boss monsters and recyclabilities in the ad-lib and drama, and then on top of that, the main card you want to be going for is something like Branded Disciple. So as a preview, for those of you unfamiliar with what this card does, is when a monster effect activated by your opponent resolves while you control a level 8 or higher Fiend fusion monster with 0 attack and or defense, you can negate the activated effect. So, luckily for you, Yubel the Loving Defender is a Fiend 0/0 above level 8. At the end of the damage state, if a monster or monsters with 0 attack battled each other, you can destroy your opponent's battling monster. So again, you've got ways of being able to burn your opponent for damage and then clear it off as well. Not just with Yubel, but keeping in mind, if a monster with 0 attack battles, it also means Yubel, Spirit of Yubel, Terra Incarnate, Ultimate Nightmare, you're getting more board clearance. Now the other engine that you can utilize with this as well is of course Lubellion and the Bestials, but I wanted to keep it kind of Fiend evil focused, which is why we went with the Despians instead. Of course, we still play the one Geist Grinder Golem, the insanely powerful Spirit of Yubel. And as a note, the branded version of this deck and even the Despia version of this deck will get even better when we get the Phantom of Yubel, which is expected to be in the new Battles of Legend, which Konami revealed not yesterday, but they revealed the packaging for it yesterday, and it's due to hit, I believe, just before Euros, which is really important. Your ideal normal summon of the deck is triple Samsara Lotus. We are only playing one Aluba, and the reason we're only playing the one Aluba is because in theory you can also count the triple branded opening to get to it, and the one you want to be using your normal summon on more times than not, which is why we've got 3 Samsara Lotus and 1 1-for-1, and then 3 branded opening and 1 Aluba is of course your Samsara Lotus. Now this is another catch-22 in the sense that your Samsara Lotus, again, as a lot of people have experienced when they're playing Yubel, if this card on its own gets stopped and you're not playing the Spirit engine, this can be a bit of a sticking point. But that's where Branded Opening can come into play, because you can either use that to bait out interaction first and your opponent will be like, oh, they're playing Branded? And then you're like, yeah, no, I'm playing Yubel. So you can get to go off with the Samsara Lotus, or of course they go on Samsara and then you get to utilize Aluba and then build off the back of that as well. Of course, Dual Nightmare Pain. You can place it too if you wanted to, but you kind of still want to see it, because seeing this early on allows you to destroy a dark monster in your hand or face on the field. So that will allow you to get any of these out of your hand into the graveyard. More so these 3 here than anything else. 1 Mature Chronicle and 1 Eternal Favourite. Now, Mature Chronicle isn't as consistent in this version in order to loop back your resource to get you into Yubel early doors or get you to a Super Poly. But the idea behind it is you can utilise reviving Yubel from the graveyard very consistently and very easily once it is there. On top of that as well, you can utilise other cards in order to kind of discard add cards, banish cards from the deck, stuff like Tragedy. So banish 1 card from your deck, banish Tragedy, search yourself out a very nice Aluba. So there are some very niche kind of interactions with it, which is why it's still worth technically playing it if you wanted to. Then for the Despias, of course, we do play the 1 Aluba, the 1 Tragedy, the 1 Adlib, and of course the 1 Dramaturge. Now it's entirely up to you if you wanted to change this ratio around. You can play more Despias, more Tragedies. The Adlibs and the Dramaturge, they kind of complement each other, but they also kind of, like, there's no necessity to play both. The reason you'd play the Adlib is because it allows you to recycle some of your fusion monsters, and as a preview in the extra deck, we are playing the 1 Guardian Chimera, but if you don't have access to this, or you can't, or you're not in the patience to wait for the expected reprint in Legendary Collection or Rarity Collection 2, then you can take this out. You'd still, I would advise, use Branded in Red in the deck because that can still get you to a Quinteris, which can help you out in sticky situations, but it can also help you get into stuff like your Proskinion, which I actually really like Proskinion, and it's a great Super Poly target as well. Then, of course, triple branded opening. This is the one that lets it tick. Now, the biggest issue with this is it will lock you into fusions. So you do need to be careful that when you're doing this, that your plan is to only go through fusions. But it still provides you with graveyard protection. It allows you to get to Aluba. Aluba can then lead you into your branded cards, which can become your Lost, your Red, and of course, like I said, the most important one for this particular version being Disciple. So if you wanted to narrow this down a lot more, you could cut out the Lost, you could cut out the Red, and you're mainly focusing on Disciple. Now, you don't really have any cards you're going to add off of the Fallen of ALBAZ. It's just nice to give you that bit of protection with Lost. But again, if you decided to put in Fallen of ALBAZ, maybe even just one Fallen of ALBAZ, and then start to use some of its extra deck cards, then you could look into doing that, and that's where your branded fusion would come into play. But like I said, I wanted to try and avoid that. If at anything, and you were like, you know what, I'm not the biggest fan of the Despia engine, but I still like the Disciples, what I would then suggest is that your 4 monsters here become 3 Lubellion plus like 1 Magnamute, and then you've got Saranir, Druid Swarm, probably at 2, and then you still keep the Disciple. You wouldn't need your Lost, you wouldn't need the Red, so you'd go for Beast and you'd go for the Regained. So it just gives you more consistency if you want to. I just didn't think that Bestials were as effective. They're still great with your deck because you could banish your own Yubel, and then you know it's going to be able to come back from the banish zone, which is quite helpful. But it really is up to you on your playstyle. Playing Double Allure for a bit of draw power. The one Despian Theatre. This is actually quite important sometimes as well because this will allow you to, during your main phase, you get to fuse your level 8 or higher fusion monsters from your extra deck using monsters from your hand or field as material. So if you wanted to be a bit aggressive, you could actually just hard fuse into your own Yubel. More times than not, of course, when you make this, you can't use your opponent's side of the board. But if you're making this with stuff like Adlib, with Tragedy, with Drama, you're going to be able to gain a bit more resource as well. It's an option, it's not an absolute must, but I still liked it as a way of being able to search out a fusion option. Of course, if you're not the biggest fan of that, then you can also consider looking at the Patchwork engine. But the Patchwork engine really comes down to accessibility, and it's not as effective with this build because when you're searching it in a branded build, you've got ALBAZ, you've got Cartesias, you've got Quests and everything else. So keep that in mind. For the hand traps, you've got triple Ash Blossom, triple Imperm, and then double Nib, just because if you go second, giving your opponent a Nib and then being able to fuse it off, or even leave this on the board and then go into a Yubel the Loving Defender and crack into it can be very damaging. And then, of course, your most important card in the deck is Super Poly, which is why you want to keep the deck at a 40 minimum, and then you want to be drawing into, or like have a bit of draw power, have a bit of deck fin ability, because unfortunately, unless you want to play the Predaplant engine, which is also just as a good option if you wanted to take out the Despian engine to search out Super Poly, it's still a really good option. Moving on to the extra deck, of course, playing 2 Yubel the Loving Defender. The hype, thankfully, has died down a little bit. This did rocket up to like 20 quid a copy. It's now come down to £10 a copy, so it makes it a little bit easier and more budget-friendly to get a hold of. For your Super Poly targets, you've got Starving Venom as like an aggressor that you can help make during your battle phase and move further forward. You've got your board breakers in Mud Dragon and Garura. And then keeping in mind, not only can these be hard summoned in general, but these can also become a Super Poly target as well now, is you've got the one Masquerade Dragon, you've got your one Despian Quinteris, and then of course you've got the one Proskinion. Now I actually really like Proskinion because it's a light and a dark monster. So as soon as your opponent commits a light monster to the board, if they even commit a dark monster to the board, you're like, yeah, cool, happy days. I'm going to take 2 of those, my Despian monster, and we're all good to rock and roll. And even if they don't, as long as you can use one of your dark monsters and their light monster, hello, voiceless voice, you're in a very good position. Because what you can do is you could go normal summon Aluba, they can chain their one to negate the Aluba, and you go, okay, cool, Super Poly, use my Aluba, your monster, and another dark monster, and that will allow me to get into Proskinion. So you've kind of got to look at what you can work with, but there are a couple of different options to get to this, and then just being able to steal their monsters back from the graveyard is very cool. Quinteris does clash a little bit with your Yubel, because you don't want your monsters to have 0 attack, but what that does allow you is it does give you a defensive option that should your opponent be able to negate your Loving Defender, should they be able to put themselves in a position to try and destroy, you can make Quinteris and reduce their attacks. And then Masquerade, because if burning with Loving Defender wasn't enough, you could just add Masquerade on top of that, and then you're kind of pushing for game. If budget allows, of course, you've got Guardian Chimera. You could also put an SP Little Knight into the extra deck as well. If budget does not allow, what you could swap out for the Guardian Chimera is a Predaplant Dracus Tapelia. Entirely up to you. The one XYZ we are playing is the Super Dreadnought Rail Cannon Gustav Max. Obviously, if you're going to make this, you're not going to activate the branded opening because that will lock you into fusions. And it's the exact same for these rest of the cards here as well in the form of Link Karibo, is if your Samsara Lotus does get stopped and you have nothing else you can do, at least you can link it off into a Link Karibo. Not ideal, but it happens. And then, of course, you've got your Muckrocker just to help you Fiend loop, should you need to, or basically Yubel loop. And then, of course, you've got your Cross Sheet, because if you make this, and then during your opponent's turn, you're branded in red, you're Super Poly in, anything like that, it can allow you to bring back your Aluba, and then Aluba gives you a search for the follow-up of the next turn. And then for the last two, we've got Dark and a Unicorn, just because we wanted to kind of keep budget in mind. So it really does come down to what you have access to. But Dark can lead you into Unicorn. Unicorn then can give you a discard and a spin. You could, because you play with quite a few high-level monsters, you could consider IP Masquerena, and then you could also consider the BLS Link monster as well, just to kind of give you another different option that not a lot of people are going to be expecting. And I think that's one thing. As soon as someone sees an Aluba, they're going to be like, oh, great, gimmick lock, branded, God, I better stop that now. And you're like, okay, cool, well, I've only used my branded opening, normal summon Samsara Lotus, off I go. And then even if you're not fusion blocked, that still gives you the fodder you're going to need to make link summons. And again, IP Masquerena, if you have access to it, to give you into the ability to get into SP Little Knight and then build off of it at the back that way. So you've got a couple of different options. I'm not saying this is the perfect Yubel build ever made. I just think it's a very spicy build. There's something a little bit different that not many people have been looking at or even considered. Mainly it was keeping an eye on your branded spells and traps, which is why the Bestials could be quite effective for you as well. And if they're going to be effective at your environment, then even more of a plus so. And that's where you could very easily tag them out. And that will give you a bit of graveyard control against your opponent, along with some very decent boss monsters to provide you with protection and disruption for your Yubel plays as well. Anyway, hope you've enjoyed this. Hope it's given you a different angle to kind of consider and something else a little bit different for your Yubel build. This is what I really like about it, is you can make different variations without breaking the bank. Of course, we all know the Unchained version. There's a pure version. I really like the Kaiju version because it gives you a very cool option for going second. And then, of course, you do have the normal pure version. And when we get more support in the future, obviously Phantom Yubel plus the field spell, the deck just gets better and better. So I do advise anyone that is interested in Yubel in general, or a fusion strategy, or just level 10 monsters that like to kind of not be destroyed by battle or card effect, you want to be looking into these. The most expensive cards are the original Yubel cards, just because even the original Yubel got reprinted in the most recent Battles of Legend set collection. And it was at about £7.50. It has gone up to £10 as well. So it's kind of bouncing around a little bit. So if you can get hold of it, grab it as soon as you can, because I don't think it will get a reprint in the near future. Anyway, thanks so much for watching. Like, comment, subscribe, share. Till next time, as absolutely always, stay safe and, of course, happy dueling.